I hope I'm loud enough. Okay. Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm Sheila Pires, born in Mozambique, living in South Africa. I'm a radio producer and presenter for Radio Veritas in South Africa. I produce a number of religious programs, including Catholic View, which looks at the Catholic Church in Africa, but with a very special focus on matters concerning women, and especially gender inequality. Now, I've watched a number of chairpersons doing very brief introductions, but I thought, let me rather read this to you, and I hope it will contribute to our discussion here. Sharing our stories, cultures, and Catholicism, that's what we're looking at today. Allow me to compare the role of women to that of salt of the earth. When we lose our taste and sense of womanhood, society is deprived of its sense of positivity. It is the daily sweat of women that build and sustain almost 90% of our men and women that contributes positively to our society in our modern times. I asked myself the question, who am I? And after doing some self-introspection, I realized that I am a product of mixed identities. I am very mulatto, or mixed in terms of culture, as I have Cape Verdean, Zulu, as well as Arab cultures, which are unified by my Catholic identity. But then again, the same Catholic identity comes to question, as when it comes to Catholic identity, you can see that it's very apparent that all these cultures is a common neglect of equal rights and dignity between men and women, a phenomenon that extends its arm to Catholicism, which is a religion dominated by the hierarchy, yet kept bound by women. Allow me to introduce our ladies here. On my right, have Zuzanna Radzik from Poland. And then we have Jennifer Owens-Jofre, Bolivia, USA. And we have Leslye Colvin from USA as well. And on my left, we have Kasafi Perkins from Jamaica. And we have Gertrude. We have Gertrude Jusuf from Sierra Leone. And Mishal Francis from Pakistan, UK. So I think we'll start with you, Zuzanna.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to share today with you. So I speak from Polish context, which I want to briefly introduce you to. What does it mean for Catholicism? What is this culture about? And I speak as a Catholic theologian in Poland, where it's not really easy to be a female Catholic theologian. We are not welcomed, embraced, encouraged to do it. I shared why I became a Catholic theologian on the Voices of Faith event, and now it's also in the book, the same story. So you can learn that from the book. I don't want to repeat it, but I wanted to stress that it's a world in terms of Catholic culture in Poland that it's not obvious choice. As a matter of fact, when I look around and I meet so many of you, being like Ginny working in the chaplainship at the Catholic University, or like Ruth working at the parish, or like all of you who teach at the universities, this is, you already have what we dream about, and we don't even know that we could dream it. Speaking from our Polish and Catholic context of a very clericalized church that still produces every fifth priest in Europe, if not fourth. So it can staff itself with a lot of clerics and doesn't need, there is no need of help of a lay people to manage it. And I'm not saying that it should be like that we should introduce lay people only when we have a deep need because we are understaffed, but that's how it often happens. We are not yet there. So we are not needed even to manage it. So speaking culturally, we are more like clients. We come and receive services. We judge them. We kind of score them. We, do churching, so we choose churches. but we are not really agents of basically creating them or influencing it, and we are not encouraged to do it. So that's our church culture, let's say. And speaking in a broader perspective of Poland, I see that there are two things that you should maybe understand about its recent history and how it shaped it. First of, and how it later on reproduced itself in the culture, also in the church. First of all, we are after a pretty terrible experience of being a country where the Holocaust happened, in the terms of lands, but also in the terms of being a people who witnessed it and also partly participated. And this complexity of identity, of struggling with not being only an innocent witness, but also sometimes a perpetrator, it's really complex identity, something that Poland still didn't grasp fully. And it's coming back in the identity debates all over during the last 30 years. Before we couldn't speak because another important part of our identity, we are a post-communist country. And it's been 30 years ago, but those things take a long time to change and transform. And when we speak about the church context, for me, for example, I was 6 years old or 5 years old when the communists collapsed. And then we lived through the 90s with this tremendous time of change. And things were changing, and I think we sort of felt that also in the church. As we were reaching standards of EU, as we were reaching and knocking doors to NATO, and things were really transforming in the country, I myself felt in the high school that, we will reach the standards of those other churches too, with the lay people being involved. Didn't happen. They let us into EU without that somehow. We needed to get our sewer system better, but not that. So this is how we grew up, and those things didn't change that much. Also because the post-communist countries often have this enrooted feeling of you should not demand, you should not be super active citizen. It probably starts only now that people give themselves rights to be active, and we see something similar in the church. This allowing yourself to say that you have right to be in the church the way you are and shape it. This is one of the probably biggest challenge and kind of a cultural change that should happen so that we would be more participating as Polish Catholics. So maybe that's for the start.
In my contribution to this collection, I point to the healing power of my women elders. My mother, my tias, my aunts, my maternal grandmother, affectionately known as Mamita, in whose footsteps I follow as a woman of Catholic faith. I describe how deftly they worked with the aloe vera plant when my cousins, siblings, and I were hurt as children. And I shine a light on the very real wounds of the Catholic Church today, exposing those wounds inflicted by gendered power dynamics in a parish where I served as a lay ecclesial minister before I was let go alongside the two other lay ecclesial ministers, also who were women with advanced degrees in ministry and theology. I close my narrative with a call for women to bring healing salve to the wounds caused by kyriarchy, a system of intersecting and mutually reinforcing oppressions that prevents us from experiencing the fullness of human flourishing. Today, I want to say very clearly that I am not making any claims that would essentialize women, that would reduce us to a one-size-fits-all image of whom women are to be. I am not arguing that we should add women to the kyriarchal pot and stir, anticipating the same outcome as before, this time with a new female ingredient. I am not romanticizing women in general, or my Bolivian American women elders in particular. To be clear, I am making a claim about the generative power of all people. In fact, I argue that all of us hold this power to heal, that all of us have creative power. This generative creative power is rooted in our common humanity and is affirmed in our baptism as priests, prophets, and royalty. Further, I lament existing church structures that prevent this generative, creative power of women in particular from being expressed to the full benefit of our ecclesial community. The current state of ecclesial affairs denies us access to the fullness of human flourishing. It does not allow our church to experience the fullness of life it could enjoy if all people were given the opportunity to utilize their generative, creative power in its service. Part of the gift of this symposium is that it provides space for us to imagine our church anew. I conclude with an invitation to reflect on these three questions together. What will a full recovery from the wounds of kyriarchy entail? What will it look like for the generative, creative power of all people to flourish? How will we imagine the church anew?
Thank you. Good afternoon. In the States, we have a saying when we are sharing our thoughts, our hearts with someone who is a kindred spirit, that we are preaching to the choir. And so I feel that today in sharing that is what we are doing, all of us, each time someone speaks. Tina has made reference to the diversity of Catholic women speak. And as a child growing up in a segregated society with one parish, when annual events would happen at the Vatican for Easter Vigil or the Midnight Mass for Christmas, and you saw a clip on the news of the people gathered at the Vatican, it is the diversity that I saw that showed me that my church was larger than the society in which I lived. I will only read one part from my submission that I believe speaks to my experience. When I listen to Mass readings of Moses leading his people from bondage to freedom, I hear it as an invitation to remember the bondage of my African ancestors and the continuing struggles of my people, simply to have their dignity recognized in theory and in practice. As a child, Jesus learned of this journey from slavery to liberation and his people's continuing faith in God. In my own childhood, the song, "Let My People Go," resonated as an ancient and modern call that was deeply personal. In speaking of diversity, we understand that each of us is born into a context. We're born into a culture. And through our life experiences, we may have opportunities to enter different cultures, something that is unexpected and unforeseen. Our journey is not one that is linear, but the journey and our witnessing, experiencing, coming to know, coming to grow in that is a cyclical process. It's not linear. And I am so proud of the young ladies here from Ursuline who at such an early age are being encouraged to share their voice. That's what being human is. Being Catholic is to use that voice because that voice, regardless of the culture or the context, that voice is gift. no one has a right to silence the voice. In the United States, slavery ended over 100 years ago, but that did not end the oppression of racism, Jim Crow. With the election of President Barack Obama, many of us, those of predominantly African, predominantly European, predominantly Asian, predominantly Native, predominantly Latino, Latina, we're proud of what we saw as a move forward. But what we are also reminded of is that it's not a linear journey. It's cyclical.
My contribution to the book is entitled Confessions of a Jamaican Flatalic. In it, I try to capture something of my experience growing up Catholic in Jamaica, where Catholicism is a minority faith. At the moment, we're like 2.2% of the population, and it's been a downward trend over the last 30, 40 years. And we are a minority that's oftentimes misunderstood and disliked. I talk about my encounter with the lyrical aggression of Rasta men. Rastas, you know, Rastafari, yeah, in the community in which I grew up. Now, these men used words like crosses, translation in Jamaican crosses. It's a Jamaican term that means evil, trouble, bad luck. And then they created a word for us, flatalic. And this is a new word that they created. Rastas have a culture of using words to address reality. They believe that words have power to change reality, and so they do make use of and change words in order to say something and to do something with reality. So they created this word to describe us. It's a neologism, and it mocks our Catholic faith, and it might even suggest, as Jamaicans say, that we lick our head. We're not too right in the head. And what it does is that it picks up on and rhymes with the word Catholic, but it focuses on the last syllable, lick, which if you ask a Jamaican is to give somebody a really hard hit with something. So they fall on the ground and they start to convulse. So when you flatter, you convulse, and you can lick somebody and get them to flatter. So flatalic. And it was their attempt to shame us for being members of the oppressive white man's church. And I recall as a teenager feeling very shamed and disrespected by their behavior. But it had the opposite effect as to what they wanted to have happen, because what it did was that it made me hold on more strongly to my faith and made me want to learn more about this faith that was so troubling to so many. And I look back at that and see that as perhaps one of the threads that went into the call that I had to study theology. And as I reflected on how these men shamed us as teenagers, it led me to reflect on how women are treated both in Jamaican popular culture and in our church in subtle and not so subtle ways. Now, our popular culture, Jamaican culture, is male-dominated, and women are measured and weighed. We're weighed for attractiveness, for our ability to satisfy men's sexual needs, and for our childbearing abilities. And then when I looked on my church, I found that church shamed us for having or being female bodies that menstruate and can't stand in persona Christi. Yet this church is a nourishing space for someone like myself, where I can find my faith and my intellect encouraged and valued. And understanding all of this has strengthened my resolve to work to give a flatalic to all that shames women in church and society.
Good afternoon to you all. I'm really excited and glad to be here with you all from various parts of the world. This is my first opportunity, and I'm grateful to Dr. Tina Betty, who, in her tireless efforts to bring me here, to make me part of this great event. It is a great event. I call it a great event because it has not happened in my country. So when I go back and share all my experience, it's going to be great for us. So I thank you very much, Dr. Betty. I come from Sierra Leone, Freetown, West Africa, and I'm in administration in a school dealing with children at the age of 3 to 12. And after the war, we endeavored to give these children quality education because during the war, our education was crumbled. For 10 years, you could imagine we didn't get education. So now we are embarked on it, and especially for the marginalized, the underprivileged, and the girl child children. My contribution to this book actually is I chose to write my own story. I was encouraged by the school sisters of Notre Dame to do that, but I didn't have the opportunity. So when I had this opportunity from a friend, I said, wow, I could now speak out what is in me. And this is the story similar to most of the girls and women in my country, because my country had this war, and they targeted the Catholic women and the girls. These women and girls, they were kidnapped, taken to the bush, and taken as wives and sex objects to the rebels and the soldiers who went to help us from various parts of the world. And so I was even affected because I had several attacks on me, which sometimes we have to go to remote areas to seek for refuge. You stay there for some time, you come back, you have another attack, then you go back. But then the Catholic Church was very much instrumental towards the end of the war. The Catholic women stood on their own to challenge the rebels, to release these kidnapped girls, to release them as wives, as their sex objects. So they asked them to stop the war and to bring out these girls so that they can again regain their human dignity. So the church was instrumental in the women. The women took that from themselves. And in Sierra Leone, we really have a rich culture. But then this same culture is saying girls should not be sent to school. They don't see it very important to send these girls to school. They are the least to be sent to school. They say their place is in the kitchen. They don't show up even in decision-makings in the families. So this is the culture presently after the war. The war had finished 10 years ago, but it's like we are still in the same place. These women must not show up. Even in churches, we don't take positions. We don't take authority in the church. We are just there. They don't see us. But then when it comes to doing all the, maybe the dirty works, cleaning around the church, we are there. But we should not be heard. Our voices should not be heard. And so they don't see, they don't give the girls, the women, these educational opportunities at all. There's this culture of silence even, which if, like, girls are raped, you don't talk about it. It's silence. When the family tries to say it out or take police action, is that you are destroying the culture. So consequently, these girls and these women, they become dropouts. If they manage to go to school again, they become dropouts, and they become vulnerable to these sexual abuses, which nobody is ready to talk about. So they end up with early marriages and these unwanted pregnancies, and they are forced to carry these children around. Sometimes even if they are fortunate for a man to own up, fine, maybe small support. But if the man does not open up, you are forced to carry that baby alone. Nobody will show up for it. So who will speak for these women in our country? There is this culture of silence. Few of us that are educated, when we manage to talk, the church does not want us. Me, as ex-religious, the church never accepted me. So I'm just working with these children, under 3 to 12, giving them this education to regain their human dignity again, so that they will be self-reliant and not depend on these people who are abusing them sexually. So from my experience, I say, there's this African proverb that says, if you educate a boy, you are educating an individual. But if you educate a girl, you are educating the nation. So that's why I'm into this education and administration. And there has been now some educational programs who are really empowering these girls to build up their self-esteem again, since they were abused the past 10 years, to build up their self-esteem, to be self-reliant, and to be independent people. There are these programs around. And a little bit I want to add is Sierra Leone is a developing country. Still, we have been colonized. We have been independent 56 years ago. You can't believe. The child mortality rate and the maternal mortality is on the highest up till now. So the country is saying that we have to work hard to maybe save 600 women from dying from childbirth and 5,000 children by the end of 2018. I thank you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the last one to go in the panel. No pressure there. Thank you for having me here, Tina, and I'm just so excited to be a part of this panel with so much wisdom and so much experience that you have shared with me over the past couple of days that we've been here. Thank you for that. So my name is Mishal Francis, as Sheila mentioned earlier. I am from Scotland and from Pakistan, but I'll explain a little bit about that. 15 years ago, my family of 6 members, parents, and 4 of us, siblings, an older brother, myself, and 2 younger sisters, had to run away from Pakistan and find refuge in Scotland because of persecution. And I am the second oldest of the children and the oldest of the daughters. In my family, it falls on my shoulders to care, to nurture, and to inspire my 2 younger sisters. But I'm also a Christian, and I'm also a Pakistani. And that means it also falls on my shoulders to care for my brothers and sisters in Pakistan. I have contributed to the book. In the essay, it's called Fire in My Heart. It's called Fire in My Heart because I have a deep desire to be a voice for the voiceless of the persecuted Christians in Pakistan, our persecuted church. According to the Open Doors organization, and this is all over the world, in 1 month, there are 255 Christians that are killed, 104 that are abducted, 180 Christian women are raped, sexually harassed, and forced into marriage, 66 churches are attacked, and 160 Christians are detained without trial and are imprisoned. In Pakistan, many Christians are considered as untouchables. And I was one of those untouchables. And God has saved us. He gave us the opportunity to move from Pakistan and find secure and a safe home in Scotland. But there are many, many Christians, 2% Christians in Pakistan, that suffer this. I cannot eradicate poverty or discrimination or persecution on my own. But what I can do is share my story. And that's what I've done in this contribution. However, this deep desire that I had, it just can't be quenched by writing a little piece in a book. I needed to do something about this. And I went and I spoke to my dad, and I said, well, Dad, you know, we've come from Pakistan and all this, and I want to do something for young women in Pakistan. And he said to me, and at that time it was a complete shock, he said to me that him and my mother had been saving and had been sending to a school in Pakistan educating young women. And then he shared a story with me that moved me so much that I had to get involved. And the story goes like this. There is a young girl that goes to school, and her tuition has been paid for, but has over time decided that she doesn't want to come to school anymore because she is forced by her parents to go to work. And she has to go to work because there needs to be income coming into the household. And men are not allowed in Pakistani culture, or not, I guess it's just a cultural thing, that men don't really go and serve in other houses as maids or, you know, as house helpers. So women offered to do so. And this girl offered to do so and be the breadwinner in this household. And she goes to this household and is on a regular basis, on an everyday basis, is raped and sexually assaulted. And this distressed my father quite a bit. And when and for a father to say that to his daughter, again, in a cultural thing, is quite a difficult thing. But I really commend my father and my mother, because they have really given us so much freedom within the family to speak our minds and to have opinions and to really make of ourselves whatever we wanted to. And at that point, I think he was really proud of me that I said, Dad, is it okay if I can go and help this girl? And maybe we can give something to the family. And that was pretty much the conversation that started our charity, Hope Human Development and Welfare Association. And that was quite a few years ago, but 5 years ago, we were fully established as a Scottish charity. And since then, we have provided education for the young women. And I will not tell you what area of Pakistan because it creates issues. But it's in the province of Punjab. And we have provided them with a new building, new classrooms, new materials, and fresh water for the whole village within that time. I hope to continue this work, as well as the work that I do in the Diocese of Motherwell and Archdiocese of Glasgow as a youth development worker and leadership formator. And I also I'm a part of a professional doctorate that I'm doing part-time while I do this full-time work in the parishes, to be the voice, to write about these experiences, and to talk about the Christians that are persecuted in Pakistan. Thank you.
All right. I think we've all heard that amongst us here and amongst yourselves as well, we share a lot when it comes to cultures, Catholicism. But one question that comes to mind, as much as we want to empower the girl child, as much as we want to help women, we forget one thing. What about the boy child? And I speak like this as a single mother of a boy child. I think it's very important to teach our boys right from a very early age to be respectful of their female counterparts. Because only then we can change this mentality. Only then we can change these cultures. And that's exactly what I do with my son. I constantly remind him that he's not better or less than his female counterparts, and that no means no, and that he can also wash dishes, he can clean the house, he can cook for himself. And once we do that with young boys, then we'll have a whole new generation of citizens that respect each other. And at the same time, when you look at culture, culture also teaches us, especially in South Africa, when you look at Ubuntu, Ubuntu teaches us that we respect one another. And that's my question that I want to put to you, ladies. In terms of raising a boy child to respect his female counterparts, this can change a whole lot of society, the new generation. What are your thoughts surrounding this?
I can quickly jump in. I was just recently having a workshop in a surprisingly mainstream church event organized by the main bishop of Poland. And since they invited me to do a workshop on the women's issues, I didn't want to be, didn't want it to sound to feminists so that they don't scare away. So I called it, "How do we build the church of equal men and women?" And that actually worked pretty well. Not speaking about the child, but the men themselves. There was quite a lot of men during the workshop. Also priests and seminarians came, which is not so obvious for Polish context, speaking about those issues. And men got so excited. Because, when we were speaking about women's rights, we were also highlighting, and I was pushing them to think, well, you're in the similar situation as laymen. You don't have much field of activity within the church. And they were so happy that we can actually, that we embrace their cause in our women's cause, and they jump in with so many creative issues. So that was sort of, we started with a platform of emancipating women and invited laymen over, and they joined with power and passion, because usually no one speaks to them about it. So that's one of the things maybe relating to your...
And then I just want to add another thing, is that this also came to mind, or rather a lady emphasized this thought of raising good boy children for a better society, and she's right on my left. And that was Anna, in an interview we did prior to today. And she also echoed the same sentiments, and I was hoping she would share this with us today.
Thanks, Sheila. Well, part of what I think I was speaking about in that conversation is the fact that I believe that as women, we have a greater responsibility. And I'm speaking specifically from my Jamaican context, because women tend to be single parents raising the children. So if we want to make a change in how we socialize our boys, there's a huge responsibility that women have to ensure that they bring their boys up in ways that will be respectful of them and respectful of the women that they're going to be engaging with and interacting with beyond, when they leave their mother's house and so on. So it doesn't mean that I'm suggesting that we're letting the man or the men off the hook. By no means. But because we're the ones that are shaping the boys primarily, up to a point, you do know once they get into their teens, then it's the peer group that's going to take over. So you do have to lay a very, very strong foundation with them. And so there's some cultural things that we do as women that I really object to. So if you're going to teach a boy to cook, you're going to tell him he needs to learn to cook because you don't want any woman to take advantage of him. So it's always something that's going to be opposed to what a woman is going to do. And that's not what it's about. You're continuing to create men who don't value themselves and who don't value women, who don't see women as equal partners. And that's part of what I was trying to get at in that part of our conversation.
Anyone else would like to share?
Like in Sierra Leone, we are talking about these sex roles. A girl is supposed to be in the kitchen, while the boy will be playing ball somewhere, yes. Then gradually, the mother will say, you are supposed to split the wood, and the girl is supposed to wash the dishes. That thing is going on. But with these modern times, the mothers really are teaching the boys. What if your sister is not here? You can't cook, you stay hungry. What about if she's sick? You can't cook, and I'm in the market selling, you can cook. So these roles, they are beginning to do the same roles. The girls can split the wood now, the boys can cook, they can sweep the house, they can mop the house, so this one is going. So it's right, Sheila, what you said. We have also to teach the boys, and even when they go into marriage, once their wives are not there, they can't cook. So some of our tribes back home, they can't boil water, simple water, they can't boil water. They are sitting there waiting for the woman to come from all the hard labor in the market and boil the water. What is wrong if you boil the water? So it's good that you said that.
I just wanted to say that I've just recently been married, so we don't really have children yet, but we're open to this. But if God would bless us with children, I think that it's not just my responsibility to teach a young boy, or if in the future God blesses us with a young boy, to respect women, but it's also my husband's responsibility too. And I think it's not just women who have to teach young men how to respect women. I think that older men need to be the role models for young men, so that they can see that it's a good thing and it's a healthy thing, and it doesn't make you less of a man, actually makes you more of a man. And I think that if my husband was here, he would share this. We only started living together once we were married. We were very traditional in that sense. So we had to learn how to live together. And I think that it was just as much of a learning thing for him as it was for me. And we share responsibilities in the house of cleaning and cooking and doing the washing and things like that. And he's half Italian, so obviously he knows how to cook. It works in my favor. But either way, as those responsibilities are kind of shared, and children see that their parents share these responsibilities, it helps them to understand that that's a normal thing. And we need to make that a norm within our families, within what we do, so that the young people can see that. And that's how equality really comes about.
How much time do we have? Okay. Okay, well then, let's go to I think we should just come to our conclusion remarks. And one of the things that we're talking about earlier is that when you look at culture and Catholicism, how can we merge the two? Is it something that can be merged, or do we have them differently? Because at the same time, if you look, for example, in the African context, let's put it that way, we've had our cultures before the colonialists came to Africa, and they're the ones who actually brought religion, as in Catholicism, to us. And before that, we had our ways of praying. But then when Catholicism came, we now shifted and we started following this path. So how do we then merge the two? Is it something that can be done, or are we supposed to have our own African culture on the one side and have our religion on the other side? So I don't know, maybe Leslye, we can start with you, seeing that you're very sentimental when it comes to ancestors and wanting to know your African roots.
I think it's important to recognize, you mentioned colonialism, and so my ancestors' journey to Christianity itself came as a result of them having been kidnapped and changed from being identified as people to cargo. I think for me and other descendants of those who have experienced that or colonialism, it's up to us to study and recognize the impact of the slave trade or colonialism on the faith and how the faith was distorted to serve the purpose of the slaveholders or the colonialists. And I think that when we are able to do that and unwhitewash Christianity, Catholicism, we are able to move deeper within our journey of knowing of ourselves and growth. Try to be brief.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
I'd just like to follow up on that. And first, I want to self-identify more clerially. I speak as a second-generation Bolivian American woman. I'm also a Catholic theologian who writes from a mujerista perspective. And I really appreciate the opportunity to acknowledge the legacy that colonialism has on Bolivian American and Catholic contexts, because I think the ways in which those contexts are joined too often are joined through violence, right? So I want to presence that reality in this space and really make a call for conversion from the ways in which that violence has occurred, especially at the hands of light-skinned folks like me. Especially light-skinned men in particular. And I think it's important in these conversations that we put at the center of them the voices of dark-skinned Latina Catholic women, especially indigenous women, in determining the way forward. And I feel that I just want to name the responsibility of light-skinned women, not only to listen, but also to seek permission to amplify these voices.
So I guess my context is a little bit different since we were not colonized, never colonized, but we've been a Christian country for, 1,052 years this year? So it's really hard to dig back, and find something that was not, and there is no temptation of doing it. Rather differently, I would unemerge from this, of this combination of culture and faith, to free Catholicism from the context, because sometimes it gets too much rooted in it, and too Polish, and not enough Catholic in that sense. And we see what kind of price you pay for that. We have a predominantly Catholic country with 90+% people baptized, 40-something practicing more often. But still, and politicians playing that card all over again and again. And probably you have this experience in your countries too, those who have a big Catholic presence. And as much as when the power gets merged, this church and political power, eventually church loses. I mean, we know it from history. We see it in Poland right now, where we have a class of Catholic politicians who claim they are Catholic, and at the same time, when the bishops come to push for accepting refugees, Poland is one of the countries in Europe that is not letting refugees in and not participating in those European Union quotas. And the Catholic ministers who run to churches all the time, they say, well, I'm doing it, I'm not allowing it because of defending Christian character of our nation. This is what happens when it's too much merged. So where I'm speaking from, splitting it would be a benefit for our context. And so that's one of the examples. We also see a lot of and a lot of countries in Europe see nationalistic movements on the rise. In our sense, in our case, most of those nationalistic movements use Catholic rhetorics. We even had a nationalist leader that was a Catholic priest, like half a year after he was ordained. And I kept saying, this is not why church gave him the clothing so that he speaks on the rallies for the nationalists. He's out. But that's what happens when it's too close and too much. So there are many dangers included too. And I would be, remember that you're Catholic, meaning universal too, and care about those universal issues that will broaden your perspective.
As a really quickly, going back to where I started, the Rastafarian tradition has been really important in terms of building up the critical tradition in the Caribbean. They're a critical voice for critiquing what colonialism has done. Christianity, clothed in this colonial mentality, has done quite a lot to denigrate the value of black people. And so I quite understand their challenge with someone like me entering a space that European colonial or was seen to be that. So I guess for me, we're a minority space, so the impact that we're going to have is not anywhere near like what's happening in Poland, for example. Yeah. But certainly, there's a critical tradition that we bring that helps us to realize that there's never going to be a space where Catholicism is separated from culture. It's not possible. It's embedded in some kind of culture that's going to impose itself on another. And that's the kind of critical approach that we need to take in order to understand how to treat with it when we face it. But it's never going to be separate.
In Sierra Leone, we had our first bishop when the religion was taken to Sierra Leone. And he's now emeritus. But before he retired, he introduced what they called acculturation in the church. So we do not really separate, culture from Catholicism. He introduced certain things in the church that could be blended with the worship. Like, for example, for offertory, we use some traditional dances to bring up our offertory to the priest. And in times of ordination, there was this one priest who came from a traditional chieftaincy home. When they were presenting him, they carried a horn. You know horn? I don't know if a horn, you blow it. So the priest to be ordained, was in front of his parents, and this horn, that was my first time. I even saw it myself in Sierra Leone. I went for that ordination, and the way they presented him. So it's a blend of the culture and the religion, so that the people will not feel that everything is taken away from them. So that you will use that to encourage them to accept the religion and to continue to practice the religion.
So when I moved to Scotland, I was 14 years old. And I've been in Scotland for 15 years. Here I've given my age away. So I feel like I already have a confusion of two cultures. But what I didn't have a confusion of was being a Catholic. And I think this very platform that we are sitting on, we have all come from different cultures, but we are all Catholic women. And I think, above all, that is my true identity. That is who I am. And even though there is all this confusion of young people in Pakistan who are really, really passionate about their faith, and then young people in Scotland that are really not passionate about their faith at times, we have a lot to learn from each other. And I think if we did that, rather than being so truly immersed in one culture or another, and just kind of learn from each other, I think we would be a better society. And I think we would be better Catholics. So I'm just trying to put it into, take it out of this context of just country and person to person. But, like we are saying, we're all human beings, in the same way as we are here, we are Catholics, and we have a responsibility of doing something with it. Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to say on that note, thank you so much to all our ladies here, and a very, very big thank you to Catholic Women Speak for inviting us. Thank you so much.